Welcome to Talent Unfiltered, located at the intersection of innovation and all things talent. Talent Unfiltered is presented by HireWorks. HireWorks, talent forward. Now, here is your host, Ron Gaudier.
It is Monday, August 3rd, 2020. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talent Unfiltered, presented by HireWorks. I am Ron Gaudier, coming to you from Chicago, as usual. I do hope that you are all safe, sound, and healthy. It is another great day here in Chicago, in spite of everything that is going on, not the least of which are some new travel restrictions on movement in and out of the Chicagoland area. I had planned to go out of town this weekend, only to find that these new restrictions meant I would have to quarantine for 14 days when I got back. And if I didn't, I was subject to a fine up to $500 per day for every occurrence. Needless to say, I decided to stay here. And that brings me to my thought of the day, something that I'd like each of you to try to do. Be responsible. Think about the decisions, the risks that you're willing to take with your health and the health of others during this time. Be cautious. I am convinced that we are not on the back end of this. I think that's pretty obvious. If you believe in science, you probably feel exactly the same way. This is not over by any stretch of the imagination. And to those friends of mine out there, and I do have many of you who find masks and social distancing, the requests, the mandates to be an infringement of your rights, I would offer this to you, that I think you have more freedom by wearing a mask. You're allowed to do more things. We have less chance of our country being forced to ratchet back all of the openings that we've been able to do so far. We see cases exploding all over. We see death rates going up. Please be responsible. And to those people who just won't wear one, let me give you this example. Go out and look for a person, and there are plenty of them out there. Go out and look for a person who was staunch about the idea of not wearing a mask and then contracted the coronavirus and got sick, and ask them what they think. This is real. It is deadly to certain groups of our population, and it's not something to be trifled with. Please be responsible. Okay, that's enough of a soapbox for today. We have a great show coming up for you today. Jason Seiden, who is a person I've gotten to know a little bit over the last couple of years. He is one of the more charismatic public speakers that I have had the pleasure of working with. He is also the Chief Marketing Officer of Moovila, and he is a marketing and branding expert. And I'm pretty sure, in fact, I'm 100% sure you're going to enjoy his discussion with us today. So before we get started with that, I want to remind you that you can connect with the show on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. The show is available on Spotify, Buzzsprout, Soundcloud, and there is a video version, which some of you are watching right now on YouTube. All you need to do is go to any one of those platforms, search Talent Unfiltered, and you will find us. You can also email the show if you like at showinfo@talentunfiltered.com. If you like what we do, like, subscribe, and share, and turn on the notifications so you don't miss any new content coming from us. All right, let's get to it. As I mentioned, Jason Seiden is with us today. He is the Chief Marketing Officer of Moovila. He is an amazing public speaker who I have had a chance to work with at a couple of different conferences and get to know a little bit personally over the last year. His career has taken him from the beginning of the .com explosion when he was with RollingStone.com in the late 90s, early 2000s, and has taken him all the way up to his role today. He is thoughtful, he is funny, he is a brand expert, and he shares my love of tattoos, which means he is a right-thinking kind of guy. And he joins us here on Talent Unfiltered. Hey, Jason, thanks so much for joining us today, man. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, thank you, Ron. It's a pleasure to be here. How are you?
Yeah,
How are you doing with
I'm
quarantine?
good. Well, quarantine is that's a crapshoot, right? Like you can be doing good on one day and not be doing so good on the next. I was supposed to go to St. Louis last weekend, and there was a new restriction now from City of Chicago and State of Illinois that if you go to certain states, you
hmm
have to quarantine when you come back, or you risk a $500 up to a $500 a day fine.
Yeah.
And so my plans changed pretty quickly because that came out right as I was getting ready to leave. So long answer to your question is I'm confused. Short answer is I'm fine, but
Yes,
you know,
right. So last week I was supposed to be on vacation, and literally every state, I kept changing the plans, and
uh-huh.
those states kept just shutting down one after
Yep.
another. I'm like, all right, I
Yep.
give up. I give
Yep.
up.
Well, any
Right?
place you want to go that's fun runs the
Yeah,
risk of
we get
having
it.
kind of a flare up of the virus. And you and I have talked before, and it's I've actually been really looking forward to having you on today because
Likewise.
I love listening to the way you approach life and business and branding and a whole bunch of other things that I told everybody about in the intro. But it seems to me that our world is so splintered, so segmented, so tribal right now that it's very hard to get anything done. You have a crowd that says no masks
Yeah.
because it infringes on my liberty, and yet your liberty is actually infringed upon by not wearing a mask. And so I don't know, man. I've struggled with this since it started. How are you and your family
We're
holding up with it?
we're good. We're
Okay.
we're great.
Okay.
Thank you for right. You're just like, hey, how are you? But that's how I roll. It's like I'm going to take it in an unexpected
Exactly.
direction.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm one of those. I'm a very informal guy. You should know that by now. I've had
We're
the pleasure of getting to know you a little bit,
yeah,
but I,
we're getting good at resilience.
yeah. Well, I think that's the job, right? That's part of the gig right now. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to chew up your entire day. Thank you so
Sure.
much again for jumping on with us. I wanted to have you here today because, as the title of the show suggests, I think that you are an expert at the art of being human, and it's one of the things that I really, really admire about you. The first time I ever got to hear you speak was about a year ago, and we were at a conference together, as a matter of fact. Both of us, as part of that, I was helping to moderate and host, and you were one of the speakers there that day. And I was just drawn to the way that you approach things. And so I have a whole bunch of questions that I want to ask, and I want to see kind of what your experience is. So first off, in the talks that I've heard you give, whether that was live or taped, you talk about treating employees as people and not as things. And to me, that seems like a super simple, pretty obvious concept. But so often things get distilled down to numbers, right? And someone's trying to figure out how does this head count or how does this person figure into my P&L. So where I want to start with this is I'd like you to explain to the audience why this concept is critical in restarting our economy and getting business back up and running and really understanding that people are people and not things or numbers or things that are tied to a P&L solely or exclusively.
Yeah. So thank you for all the kind words.
You're
And
welcome. Well, you're my friend.
for
I'll say nice things about you.
right, right. And for a leadoff question that could not be bigger. You know?
Exactly. Well, I thought if nothing else, it would take up the whole 30 minutes or whatever, because I know
Exactly.
you can wail when you get going on an idea
Yeah.
like this. So,
I mean, we're all experiencing that, right? And the news today is what's in the news has everything to do with groups who have been dehumanized and depersonalized for far too long. And all of us feel as individuals, as shares of the human condition, we feel a measure of frustration when we are not seen. I feel like the perfect job for me would be to bear witness and just let people know they're seen. It makes a difference. The challenge that we have when we're the ones who are exhausted seeing other people, and we kind of want everybody to just toughen up and deal with it, is that uh, the benefits are not immediately felt, nor are they felt by the bearer of witness, right? The one being seen feels it. The one doing the scene, like you have,
yeah.
how many times have we had that experience where you get feedback from somebody and they tell you, you have no idea what a huge impact you had on my life. It was a 20-second interaction. I'm sure you don't remember it, but it had blah, blah, blah. Those moments, like they don't feel like anything to the ones
Mhm.
being good people. So it's kind of hard to remember how important it is to do all that. Uh, I kind of liken it. Um, I kind of liken what we're dealing with to the discovery of antioxidants. There is
Interesting.
something that connects people and it has an impact on us, but we haven't really made it a thing inside of companies, or when we're dealing with customers, or really any in politics, because we don't know how to articulate it, we don't know how to measure it, we don't know exactly what it is. And so I kind of imagined once upon a time, uh, I could argue, blueberries, are they healthy or not? I don't know. It kind of looks like if I eat them, I live longer.
Right.
And then we discover antioxidants. Like, oh, well, the discovery didn't make blueberries any more nutritious, but it gave us a language for describing how they're nutritious and the impact that they have on us. And so now, adults, parents everywhere have more ammunition to be like, look, kids, you got to eat your blueberries. You need your antioxidants.
Sure.
You got to eat your vegetables. It's not just you need your vitamins. It's like you need the following vitamins. So when it comes to treating each other like humans, I think given what we're going through in the world right now, it's kind of self-evident that if you uh, hold that back from people over too long a period of time, bad stuff happens. Uh, in companies, the stakes are not quite as high as what we're dealing with at a societal level, but they still exist. The erosion of culture, the more transactional relationships people have with their bosses, the turnover, those are all functions of just not being seen and not being
Hmm.
treated well. And is it enough to see somebody? No, it's not enough. Like, you still have to actually pay them, a living wage, and you've got to make sure the work is interesting. But it goes a long way, number one, to cushioning the blow when those other things aren't there. And there's times where business is stressful; those things aren't going to be there.
Right.
Especially if you're in a service economy. Client says no, or they go belly up. You know what? The bonuses are going to be skinny this year. So you need something else to fall back on. The other thing it does is it provides the foundation for a conversation. So instead of an employee going, oh, well, you're not paying me enough, bye, they go, hey, Ron, like, I know you would never do this to me on purpose, but you do realize, like, my peer group has started to outpace me, and we can have a conversation because we know we see each other. So for the big reasons and for the little reasons, it's important to do this, even if you can't measure it, because I'm telling you, sure as God put little green apples on this earth, one day we will figure out what is happening between people, and what little molecules are zipping back and forth, and we'll be able to identify it and measure it.
I love the fact that you just said, as sure as God put little green apples on this earth. And the reason I love that is that's one of those phrases my mom used. My
I got
mom
to be
used to
my
say,
dad, right?
dollars to donuts, which
Donuts.
I never really understood that phrase. And as sure as God made little green
Yeah,
apples, right?
yeah.
Which always have an anti positive digestive thing that goes along with that. You talk about relationships and not understanding the impact of them. I actually had an experience similar to that just recently, and I just it's powerful that you bring it up because this was somebody that I worked with 25 years ago, and I remember this person was going through some personal stuff, and I was actually their manager at that time.
Hmm.
And he said to me, he said, "You'll never remember this," but he goes, "Whenever I would have problems, you would say, 'Hey, come on, let's go grab a cigarette.'" I was a big smoker at the time. And he
Hmm.
said, "Hey, let's go have a cigarette and talk." And he goes, "And you don't know what that did for me just because you were my boss, that you actually saw me as a person." And in all transparency, I didn't do that intentionally. It wasn't completely altruistic. I kind of wanted him to be productive again.
Yeah,
But I also knew that this person required a sounding board.
yeah.
And so I was grateful for that opportunity. So okay, if I look at your career, it's been an interesting one because I talk about it. I talked about it in the introduction. From Rolling Stone to where you are today as a chief marketing officer.
Yeah.
It's an interesting progression, and part of that progression made your expertise both in branding, both personal and corporate branding.
Hmm.
And I believe that companies are going to have to respond in a particular way as a result of what we're going through today, whether that's social unrest, whether that's
Yeah.
COVID. Um, uh, how does how should companies think about adjusting their branding or shifting their branding or candidate experiences to address the things that people are going through right now as they get ready to not only hire, but try to onboard somebody in a remote environment?
Yeah. Start by telling the truth. Yeah. And just being honest, it goes a long way. I've had a story. My career has been a story. And looking back, sometimes the only way to really understand a story is to kind of look back, because you're going through it. You just see the challenge in front of you. Every role that I've had has helped me understand the interactions between people and organizations, and specifically the role communication plays in those relationships. And I've either had to deepen my own ability to improve those kinds of communications, or it's broadened my awareness of the different myriad ways that communication surface tension gets in the way of people's relationships. And one of the kind of universal truths that I've never been able to get away from is no trust, no nothing. And one of the other things that I've kind of figured out over my years is, well, I'll say it personally. My life got immeasurably simpler when I realized I am a walking cliche. That when I walk in the room, everybody already has formed an opinion, and whether I agree
Right.
with their opinion or not, I know what it is. And if I just play to that and let it stand, and don't come in bitter, and don't fight it, and don't think of all the ways that I'm more than just this stereotype. Okay, yes, that's me. Let's start there, and now we can move forward. That um, that that's how you build a relationship, right?
Mhm.
And because you think about it, first of all, if you think you know something about me, and the first thing I do is argue with you, and apropos of what we were talking about before, the very first thing I'm doing is invalidating your opinion.
Sure.
The second thing I'm doing is I'm telling you something that you think is untrue. So the only path forward is to really say yes, and to pull out the Second City improv. Like, you think I'm something? Yes. And let me show you all the other things I also am. Or,
Okay.
and I was that, and I'm changing, or I've changed. Um, or yes, I am that, and you're wrong. I'm not. Like, it doesn't matter, but I have to
Right.
accept it first as my starting point.
Sure.
So what does that mean for companies? Uh, it means a few things. Number one, nobody cares about a company, right? Like, we're so trained to see companies as uh, the nameless, faceless. Like, if people see you as the enemy, then accept that yes, you are the enemy. Like, I don't want to hear a bunch of BS about how we're doing all this stuff. Like,
Right.
first things first. Yeah, like, we're a company. Like, we're imperfect. We've got warts,
Mhm.
and we're taking them seriously. And we probably should have been doing this a long time ago. I have no real answer for why we didn't, but the world has changed, and um, there's a Beastie Boys documentary on Apple right now, and there is a line.
Leave it to you to interject a Beastie Boys reference
Of
into this
course,
interview. I
and
appreciate that more than you know, but
the right, but well, you got
if
the
I could
guitar
get
in
the
the
copy, if
background,
I had
so
a BMI, if I had a BMI license, I'd be playing Sabotage or something like that
well,
on the way in or out here. So
so right, so actually, MCA on ill communication talks about the women hating has got to stop. Right,
mhm.
here's a little something that's long overdue, and and in the documentary, which is a different conversation, uh, Adrock and Mike D are talking, and they describe Adam Yauch's reaction when called out for the hypocrisy of that statement, right? And what he said was, "Listen, I'd rather be called a hypocrite and be on the right side of history now than be consistently wrong for the rest of my life."
Mhm.
And there's a great lesson for companies to take from that. You're going to get called out. Let's not pretend like the past didn't happen. Just own it and move on. And if there's a measure of hypocrisy, then there's a measure of hypocrisy, but get on the right side of history as fast as you can and tell the truth about it.
Yeah, it's so hard. You and I had a conversation the other day in prep for this, and we were talking about younger companies being more agile in some ways, being
Mm-hmm.
able to adjust, and mature companies, but not being able to prepare in others, and more mature companies not being able to adjust, but being ready to weather the storm, so to speak, of whatever happens in the economy. And
Yeah.
I find it interesting that it seems like even in business, there are these two tribes. There are these mature organizations that say, this is the way we've always done it. It's gotten us through every other recession, the Great Depression, yada, 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 yada. And they keep right on going down that path. And they learn no lessons from the younger companies and vice versa. The younger companies, the less mature organizations, don't look at the things that those really established companies did to get to where they are. And to me, it's analogous to what's going on in our society. Nobody wants to hear anybody else. And when you do call someone out on hypocrisy, the first thing they do is go, "You're canceled. I'm not listening to you. You're fake news. You're this or whatever." And it's one of the things that I really find frustrating about our world, both personally and from a business standpoint now.
Sure. You know what? It's like the human condition is really glitchy. I don't mind it. It's kind of funny when you step back, and there is tension in the world between I was going to say there's two kinds of people, and it reminds me of this joke. Like there's two kinds of people who really need closure.
I
Um,
love that. I'm using that.
right,
It's now recorded forever. So
right, sure.
I'll practice the
Yeah.
timing and everything. It'll be great.
The but those tension points between the companies that want to keep rolling and the ones who want to try everything new. We need the tension, and it's nasty and it's brutal, and sometimes there's a nice evolution, and sometimes one side really wins, and sometimes the wrong side wins.
Mhm.
But that tension, that duality in business is I find it's one of the things that makes it fun and interesting, is getting to know the individuals who are making those decisions and why they're choosing those camps and the things that they're struggling with. And every once in a while, you find somebody who's trapped. They're smart. They know it. You take a CEO of a large company. I had a client years ago, massive company. They had a tiny little startup within their company. It was going gangbusters. I mean, it was growing, kind of like the 2x, 3x a
Sure.
year.
Yeah.
I was like, I love this. I can't do anything about it. It's going to be 3, 4 years before it's more than a rounding error. So we got to sell it. And the whole
Um,
world is like, why are you selling this? It's going to be the future. And it's like, I know it's the future. I can tell, like, we're about to create our competitor. I see it. I can't do anything about it. I can't get the shareholders. So he ended up
hmm.
leaving the big company and becoming an investor, and he bought into the other company. But but when you kind of get beyond the headline and the
Sure.
cancel, you find people who, like, they're well aware of their position.
Right.
Not always, but you find enough of them, and that's when life gets real interesting.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
think
where
that there's a
business
lot.
runs.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think that there are a lot of people who are, I think, in many areas of business society, there are a lot of people who are tragically not self-aware in any way, shape, or form. And it becomes very difficult to have conversations with them. And I don't mean to keep going back to politics, but it's such a prevalent thing in our
Yeah, right.
society
It's the
today. You
day
know,
we're living in.
exactly. But there was a time when Ronald Reagan, the hero of the conservative party, conservative movement, um, and Tip O'Neill, a staunch liberal, would sit down over a bottle of scotch and hammer something out, right?
Yep.
And we don't do that anymore. And
So,
to me, that's the thing that we've really lost, is the
well, so
ability to stop and have a conversation.
is a real quick detour and going back to your first question around getting to know people and the importance of seeing them. I think what we're dealing with right now is the culmination of a longer trend. It's easier to
Mhm.
understand if you kind of take a longer time horizon. And I'll say, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. You can trace this particular divisiveness back to the 90s, where things started to get nasty, and and the politicians started going home. There was a push to say, I'm not of Washington, I'm going to go home.
Yep.
And so instead of, like, rubbing elbows and walking down the corridors talking to each other, when people would come, it was more of like, you'd have more road rage between
Hmm.
congressmen and senators because they didn't know each other. And it's that communication surface tension. If you're not seeing people eye to eye, you're not recognizing, if you're not forcing yourself to break bread and spend time, then they just become strangers, and it's much easier to kind of depersonalize what's going on. And then you run into real problems and intractable ones. So
Yeah.
I think you raise a really good point.
And well, it's something that plagues every area of our lives today, right? Because we're disconnected. Um, I can
But
remember.
you don't run into people on Zoom? You don't like,
No,
oh,
no,
fancy seeing you here on
no,
this Zoom
no. I
call.
haven't, I haven't, I haven't had that happen yet.
Me neither.
Um, but but everything's planned, and it's a planned communication, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I can remember sitting with you last year for coffee, outside, looking outside at this wonderful view, and that those days are gone. And
Right.
you trace it back to the '90s. I really think it was, the Clinton administration where we really saw that kind of begin to rear its head.
Yeah. That's
But
what. Yeah. Yeah.
it's definitely progressed.
Oh,
We've
it's
gone
gotten.
farther and farther and farther to our corners since the Obama administration. And
Yeah.
I don't care where you fall, you just have to at some point be honest about what's going on and what you're seeing, right? And that to me is where we miss it. But enough politics, because I'll be here all day, and this really isn't a political show. I'm going to switch gears here. Now, I
Shoot.
want to preface this question um, by saying that I in no way want to put you in a vulnerable position. Um, I know that you lost your daughter a couple of years ago in a very painful and sudden way, and I'm probably going to get choked up even talking about it. And I didn't experience it at the level that you did, but I can't imagine what that was like. She had been suffering from complex regional pain syndrome, I believe,
Hmm.
and the pain was so bad that she ended up taking her own life. And
Hmm.
I wanna find out how that shaped you, not just personally, because I can in some way
Yeah.
understand where that might go, but how has that changed you professionally, and what is the message that you would like to share with people who are watching this?
So thank you. So thank you for being gentle with the question. I'm happy to answer it.
Okay.
And uh, and one thing that I'll kind of preface everything with is, you said one thing uh, in your setup, which was, you can't imagine. And I just want to be really clear. Please don't. Anybody, like, don't. It's like kids get together and it's, oh, this tastes awful. Try it. Just trust me, it's awful. Don't try it. Like, skip,
Yeah.
go right. Just uh, there's a uh, the changes, and kind of getting to the meat of the question. The changes happen for me on a few levels. Some of them for me have been a matter of degrees. Here's a child who uh, was my firstborn, and in being born, stretched my capacity for joy, and when she died, stretched my capacity for sorrow. And it's not like I didn't know joy and sorrow before, but I will say I know a different joy and a different sorrow today. Uh, and there's just, kind of the dial's been turned up. But professionally, it's interesting that you asked that question, because there has been a change. Um, I've had to make choices. I've had to get intentional about things that I was never intentional about. The first one was I had to get intentional about moving forward in any capacity, right? Like getting out of bed, putting my feet on the floor, making coffee, starting my day. That,
Sure.
like, today I'm going to be happy. That became a choice, and a hard choice. Uh, from a from a professional standpoint, I had to make another choice, which was, am I going to stop being me, or am I going to continue being me? There's certain things that happen that, I mean, this very easily could be the thing that not only defines me, but, becomes my, I could change my entire life. And a lot of people who lose children do. They'll pick up the mantle of the causes the kids cared for. They'll pick up the mantle of eradicating the disease, or whatever it is that
Sure.
plague their children. And for me, I had to make a choice, and my choice was, Elle was a social justice warrior. I mean, she was built for 2020. I mean, there is no question what side she'd be on. There's no quite, like, she pushed me And I have declared a position on a lot of what's going on. And it's in her honor that I have often taken the steps that I've taken. Uh, but it's still for me. Like I have made the decision to want to be somebody who has had this experience as opposed to becomes, solely defined by that experience. And, so, do you go back to work? What do you do for your career? What kind of company do you work in? For me, absolutely needed to be with people I enjoy and, doing something that I find rewarding. But I still love building. I love building companies. So I didn't want to give that up. So I've had to make some conscious, intentional decisions about how to integrate that experience into my world. And, um, and uh, it's not easy, Ron, because I will say, uh, kind of one other piece on it is there are days where you do believe that the easiest and most obvious way to honor somebody would be to show them how incapable you are of moving forward without them.
Sure.
And anytime I have that thought, it just kind of makes me realize, well, if I do that, then we've lost 2 lives. And so I find myself choosing to move forward and engage and smile and laugh and carry forward. And not always because it's easy, but because the other side is it's a non-starter.
Yeah. It's that's said so eloquently. And I think that kind of eloquence comes from pain, suffering, having to actually walk through it, right?
All the best art, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you walk through any museum, and if you're not thinking like, thank God Prozac didn't exist, then you really don't know what it took to go create what you're looking at.
Yeah. It's, I
So
sit
I'll
here and
take it.
I sit here and I think about it myself, and I'm like, it's one of the things, and I said this at the beginning, that I was drawn to the way that you presented topics, because you presented topics in a very humanistic, business topics in a very humanistic way. And I didn't know this at the time that I met you. It was only through some research and preparation here that I was able to discover this, and it solidified for me part of what I think the charisma that you have when it comes to the presentation stuff is. It's rooted in reality. It's rooted in struggle, in strife, and I find that to be able to talk about that is super important. And there's so many leaders in business today who don't want to be vulnerable professionally or personally. They have to have all the answers. They have to be the one that makes the right decision. And sometimes I find, and something I try to do, I don't think I'll ever do it quite as well as I think you do, but I try to be vulnerable to the people who work with me, because I think it's important that they see I don't necessarily have all the answers, and we're in this together, right? And I think that's an important concept for people to try to grab onto if they can.
I think there's something buried in what you just said that's so critical, and it's real easy to hide.
Mm-hmm.
Don't hide. The vulnerability, when we think about being vulnerable, I think most people think about it overly simplistically. And what ends up happening is we hide, and we hide in surprising ways. We hide in planning. We hide in an inability to make a decision. We say we're being really vulnerable. We're putting ourselves out there. We're having these conversations, but the smile's a little plastic, and the conversation's at a surface level, and it doesn't go deep enough. So if you really do want to connect with somebody, you have to engage. You can't hide. You told that story about taking the smoke breaks with your employee.
Which I'm not proud of the cigarettes, by the way.
Look, I'm on the record. I think from a productivity standpoint, there's no judgment. Like I know I'll just say I know how productive a 5-minute break can be. You
Yes,
get out, so you're like, all right,
a 5-minute break every 7 minutes that crushes your lungs is a bad thing.
That's different.
Yeah.
But I'll often tell people your intuition feels like, or my intuition feels like nothing. So there's not always that ping. It's not like I necessarily see a flash of light. I don't always get the prickles on my skin to say like, oh, say something now. Oftentimes what happens is just a thought of something to say pops into my head.
Mhm.
Say it. Just like what comes, say it. And
Yeah.
when you're closing the door to your office and redoing your ninth Excel spreadsheet for the day, instead of getting out there, engaging, talking to people, mixing it up, taking a risk, saying, I think we should go to the left. What do you think? Let's go to the left. That's when real vulnerability happens and breakthroughs start to happen.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to me to watch people cling to ideas that they are in the middle of watching not work, and they've watched it not work multiple times. But because people abhor change at the level that they do, they're willing to go through pain and suffering on and head down a road that they know isn't going to get them where they want to go. But they're so afraid of being wrong. They're so afraid of coming up with the wrong answer that they sit in these places where they isolate themselves from other people, and I don't get that from a leadership standpoint.
Yeah, look, I just sent a text right before we started filming, and I mean, like I'm gonna turn on my phone, and I might get my my hand slapped in a big way. So like I'm on there, like I think we should go do this, and this is, I mean, it's a creative, right? I mean, it's a pitch. It's
Sure,
uh, I could be way off.
sure.
Eh, so what? Like, what's going to happen to me that has like it's not going to be worse than anything else, right? Like,
Well, so
so
many companies are pivoting right now, right? I mean,
right,
like
yeah.
my organization is going through that. We're determining is the path. We always knew that as a company, what we were trying to do and where we were trying to go was ahead of the curve. It
Mhm,
was ahead of where our competitors were thinking about. Unfortunately, the curve changed, and
mhm,
it changed dramatically in one quarter's worth of business. And now people are
mhm.
scrambling to try to figure out, how do I get here? How do I get to where I was
Right.
trying to go? And it may look, in our case, it may look nothing like what we had originally planned.
Yeah.
So it's a weird time, man. It's a very weird time. All right, we're getting
Yeah.
down to the end of our
Transition.
time here. So
Yeah.
I have a question for you, and I'm actually gonna put two questions together because I think they fit nicely. I did a review of your career, and I realized that you were at rollingstone.com right during the dot-com bubble, right?
Yes, it
Right as it was
was.
right it was cranking, right?
Yep.
And you were there just as the internet was really becoming kind of an everyday part of what we do.
Hmm.
Since that time, technology has evolved at the pace that our total access, the total size of the internet doubles every 2 years. In
It's
2019,
incredible.
it was 44 trillion bytes of something. I forget, or gigabytes. Um, just an incredible amount of data out there. And when I thought about this, there's a lot that has not changed in that time frame. The HR function, as an example, is very much like it was back then. They're beginning to catch up. They're beginning to understand data is important. Okay. So,
Yep.
with that preface, with that context, I want you to put on your futurist hat, and I want you to look
Great.
12 months out in the future. I want you to talk about a couple of things. Number one, what is the business? What's the workplace going to look like 12 months from now? And secondly, how can companies, specifically people teams, set themselves up and prepare their teams to feel safe and ready and willing and excited to get back to work?
Uh, this is a question that um, I have spent a lot of time with, uh, as I think we all have. And listen, we spend time with this question every year, usually around December, where
Hmm.
we kind of look forward. Uh, this is a wild card. We are living through a truly uh, nutso time. Uh, we have we have broken the underlying principles on which our economic and political foundations have been set.
Sure.
Uh, What I don't know is when those breaks will percolate up to the top in a meaningful way. Like our we have people at home right now because of coronavirus, and we have a stock market that's still through the roof. It's like, okay, we can we've lived through stock market crashes before. We've lived through bubbles before. The dot-com boom was one. But then, the news this morning was like our GDP has fallen at a level it hasn't been seen like this since World War II. I mean,
Yep.
so there's some extremeness going on here that's hard to put our finger on. There's also no trust, no nothing, right? Getting back to that concept. Well, the idea of a democratic society working is that we all put country before party. We're not there. Like that's not like the people who are doing that are on the record that they do that. The idea of capitalism is that everybody moving in their own self-interest will allow all of us together to move forward, and that there's some natural corrections that occur when one party starts to get too much power and becomes a monopoly. Market forces will tend to correct that. In the few cases where the market forces don't, we have trust busting. That's one of the functions that government plays. That's not happening. And it's not happening for a number of reasons. The internet doesn't work that way. The internet is all about monopoly. At the infrastructure level, at the content level, right? It's all about economies of scale. The government isn't supplying that function. The markets are rewarding runaway winners, so the money so what is my prediction for the next 12 months? Who knows? Like, this is like, we're dealing with like so many huge issues in any one, right? And then, by the way, civil unrest and an election with massive implications coming up. I have no idea at the big level. At the small level, if I look at the second part of the question, what can companies do to make people feel safe? Act, be honest, be real. The place where I feel so fortunate to have landed, we're real. Like we make a tool, and the tool helps people get stuff done. Okay, like nice, simple, right? Like
Sure.
we will all of us, we will need to continue to find ways to support ourselves. We've got all this societal stuff floating around. Maybe it's my age showing, but Ron, what I'd say companies should be doing right now is being a little conservative with their cash, being a little more consensus driven with decisions, being a little more thoughtful in how they're engaging their employees, and before you go wipe out half your employee. I mean, there's this. I couldn't believe it. These CEOs were asked where they're going to stop investment for the next couple of years. Recruiting, top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
We're not hiring. Are you investing in your people? Are you holding on to the people you have? It's really hard to restart institutional knowledge, to build new relationships. So what can you do? Be really thoughtful about where you are about to invest, and maybe dial back on the 150 software platforms you have, or pull back on certain markets, or retrench and focus a product, or develop the last time I went through this, my phrase was like, I had to trade dollars for dimes with my business. Like, people weren't buying the big stuff. I went hard on the little stuff, and it took a little while, but I was able to ramp that back up. There's things you can do to make the adjustments that aren't the knee-jerk fire everybody. And
it's a great answer. I mean, it's
a mess of an answer. What are you talking about?
Well, yeah, but see, I think when people give you programmatic answers that are, here's what you need to do, here's how you need to do it, here's the things that need to happen. It's kind of like the old Schoolhouse Rock: debits, credits, collateral, right?
Yeah,
I mean, life isn't like that. Life is way more messy, and it's a very it's very refreshing to hear someone in the C-suite talk about things, about being real and transparent. And I know that there's a movement toward that. But I also think that so often people who are on the teams below the C-suite don't understand that leaders are thinking the exact same things you are. They're just using a different vernacular to get to that place and how they think about it. And one of the things we do in the group I'm involved in, Hacking HR, is we try to bring business leaders from outside of the people function in so that we can educate
Right.
practitioners, HR practitioners, about how they're thinking. And we're all saying the same thing. It's just how we get there that's a little bit different, right? I don't know, man. It's a crazy world. There's social unrest. There's all kinds of things going on,
There's also
and
there's a lot of good, and
yeah,
and it would be a shame to not acknowledge that in this transition. One of the things that I am noticing is a lot of people were being pushed to declare sides.
mhm.
And do you know Torrin Ellis?
I've heard the name. Yeah.
Just a firebrand. And I mean, I love the guy. He's a speaker. He speaks on social causes.
Mhm.
He gets up and he's a black guy and he's got the look, and he speaks with such compassion and conviction at the same time. And I heard him recently, and I was moved to act. Like, it was just done. I'm like, okay, like, I'm like everybody else. Like, where do I plug in?
Sure.
And I'm seeing so much more uh, uh, at the ground level. Like, we're all struggling together, we're all in it together, but we're in it together. And it's just really been kind of nice to see the surprising ways in which some of the mess of 2020 has brought together people that I never expected to see kind of joining forces. And
For
I'm
sure.
watching it all around me, where I live, where I work. I'm like, all right, we can build from this. It'll take a while, but
Well, and it's yeah, I go back to the whole idea of masks. I go back to all of this, and it's very easy to say that you're not going to be told what to do, and you're not going to have your liberty infringed, and then but watch those people who scream that stuff and then get COVID, and all of a sudden that tune changes pretty fast. All of a sudden, wait a minute, this is real, right?
well,
It's
Sarah, do I do I
it's
have
all real. It's
do I have
all real.
time? Do I have
Sure,
time
sure,
to just like share one?
sure, please.
So
Political soapbox time now.
no,
Go.
it actually it's the human soapbox.
Okay.
Have fun. You
Yeah.
want to influence people. You want to make people. You want to know how to take care of them. Like, literally make them feel safe. Like,
Yeah.
make them feel like their opinion is okay, and being wrong is okay, and you being wrong is okay. That if we learn nothing, I um, I had a I was having ice cream a few years ago. Teslas were just becoming popular,
Hmm.
and I'm sitting outside, and the guy next to me at the other table is just getting hot under the collar, and he's talking to the people at his table about how nutso Tesla owners are, that they would put a battery that could potentially explode underneath them. Like, that's crazy, and I couldn't help myself, and I said, listen, I'm like, and I had a hybrid at the time. I'm an early adopter, so I said, look, I hear you. You're not wrong, but, like, just thought experiment, just for a second. Had had AC or DC one initially, right? Had batteries been had Tesla one, and this was how energy was. And somebody came out today and said, "I got an idea. I got an idea. Let's get rid of the batteries. Let's have everybody sit on top of a can of gasoline." And
Yep.
every week you're going to have to go to a station, and with no flammable liquid training or
Wow.
anything, you're going to put flammable liquid from a tank into your car, and then you're going to drive away with a combustion you know,
That catches
engine
fire.
that
Yeah.
works on
Yeah.
fire.
Yeah.
Like, would you be saying the same thing about get and like his table? My we were dying. I'm like, I totally get it. Like, yeah, like, we got a lot of stuff to figure out, but
Sure.
it's like, it's easy to get lost in one side. Making things a little ridiculous and making it safe. It's so that mask. I was actually thinking about that when you said it, because I'm friends with somebody, and there was the
Yeah.
conversation we had,
Yeah.
and instead of going dark and instead of getting heavy, the conversation just stayed light. And I'm like, you know what? Okay, you're right. But then, like, I have a choice not to see you, and then we use a choice. Like, and where does it end, right? Or
Well,
can
see,
we just
if that had
agree?
been me, I'd been Mr. I'd have been Sir. I have one word for you, Pinto. Okay.
Yeah, right. Well, that's
Like,
where it
about
that's where it got to, right? And
right,
and it's a little acknowledgement that you're like, yeah, I might be a little crazy, I might be a little overboard with,
right.
but I kind of like seeing my parents.
Exactly. Exactly.
I kind of don't want to deal with the guilt. So Yeah.
Jason,
Make
I
it
got to
safe.
thank you, man. This has been a
My
blast.
pleasure.
I've really
Thank
enjoyed
you.
talking to you. I'm excited to see what you do at Moovila. I think it's going to be awesome. I'm excited to watch the next step of your career, and I hope that we can do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Ron.
All right, brother. I appreciate it. Everybody, that's Jason Seiden. Well, that's going to do it for us today. I hope that you enjoyed watching or listening to that as much as I enjoyed being a part of that. I always get something out of every interaction that I have with Jason. I believe that his approach to putting the human part of ourselves at the forefront of every interaction, whether that's business or whether that's personal, makes us better team members. It makes us better client partners, and most importantly, it makes us better human beings. Now, if you like what we did here today and you want to stay up to date, then like, subscribe, and share on your platform of choice. Don't forget to turn on the notification button so you never miss any new content from us at any time. Join us again next week when Jim Taylor from Launchways joins us here on Talent Unfiltered. Until then, stay safe.